Good morning, church. Sure feels good to be in the house of God, ain't it? Amen. His brother Tom's not here today, and so God has put a speaker that will bring His word. His name is Brother Howard, and he's just a good man. God bless you.
Thank you, Demencio. Good morning, everybody. Tom has been doing a series called the God Question. Just a second, so my notes are covered up here. Tom has been doing a series called the God Questions. What are those questions? Bertrand Russell says, I regard religion as a disease, as a source of untold misery to the human race. Lawrence Krauss, a professor, the Bible was written by a bunch of mostly literate Iron Age peasants who were trying to make sense of the world. Brian Cronk, he's a professor of philosophy, says people believe in religion because they want to. The human brain is always trying to determine why things happen, and when the reason is not clear, we tend to make up some pretty bizarre explanations. This man needs no introduction. Bruce Willis. Organized religions in general, wow, I can't hardly read that, are dying forms. They were all important when we didn't know why the sun moved, why weather changed, why hurricanes occurred, or volcanoes happened. Modern religion is the entrail of modern mythology. But there are people who interpret the Bible literally, as though he was surprised. This is from a movie called Inherit the Wind. It was filmed in 1960. It was about the Scopes monkey trial in 1925. You all might remember this teacher was busted for teaching evolution. It was illegal to teach evolution at the time. This is a Hollywood version.
How old do you think this rock is?
I am more interested in the rock of ages than I am in the age of rocks.
Dr. Page of Oberlin College tells me this rock is at least 10 million years old.
Well, Colonel Drummond, you managed to sneak in some of that scientific testimony after all.
Look, Mr. Brady, these are the fossil remains of a marine prehistoric creature found in this very county and which lived here millions of years ago when these very mountain ranges were submerged in water.
Well, I know. The Bible gives a fine account of the flood, but your professor's a little mixed up on his dates. That rock is not more than 6,000 years old.
How do you know?
A fine biblical scholar, Bishop Ussher, has determined for us the exact date and hour of the creation. It occurred in the year 4004 B.C.
Well, that's Bishop Ussher's opinion.
It's not an opinion. It's a literal fact, which the good bishop arrived at through careful computation of the ages of the prophets as set down in the Old Testament. In fact, he determined that the Lord began the creation on the 23rd of October, 4004 B.C. at 9 a.m.
At Eastern Standard Time? Or Rocky Mountain Time? It wasn't daylight saving time, was it? Because the Lord didn't make the sun until the fourth day.
That is correct.
That first day, well, what do you think it was, 24 hours long?
The Bible says it was a day.
Well, there was no sun. How do you know how long it was?
The Bible says it was a day.
Well, was it a normal day, a literal day, 24-hour day?
I don't know.
What do you think?
I do not think about things I do not think about.
Do you ever think about things that you do think about? Isn't it possible that it could have been 25 hours? There's no way to measure it, no way to tell. Could it have been 25 hours?
It's possible.
Then you interpret that the first day is recorded in the book of Genesis could have been a day of indeterminate length.
I mean to state that it is not necessarily a 24-hour day.
It could have been 30 hours. Could have been a week. Could have been a month. Could have been a year. Could have been 100 years, or it could have been 10 million years.
I protest. This is not only irrelevant, immaterial, it is illegal. I demand to know the purpose of Mr. Drummond's examination. What's he trying to do?
I'll tell you what he's trying to do. He wants to destroy everybody's belief in the Bible and in God.
That's not true, and you know it. The Bible is a book. It's a good book, but it is not the only book.
So what are the God questions? Well, these people think we're idiots. Plain and simple. You know? Are we idiots to believe that the world was created? Are we idiots to believe that the world is 6,000 years old? More like 12,000. But these people that are saying that religious people or Christians are idiots, these people influence your friends. These people influence your kids. So are we crazy? Justice Antonin Scalia, Supreme Court Justice, he just passed away last year. He said, "The body of evidence supporting creation science is as strong as the supporting evolution. In fact, it may be stronger. The evidence for evolution is far less compelling than we have been led to believe. Evolution is not a scientific fact, since it cannot actually be observed in a laboratory. Rather, evolution is merely a scientific theory or guess. It is a very bad guess at that. The scientific problems with evolution are so serious that it could accurately be termed a myth." And Scalia is right. I could spend hours and hours and hours up here with evidence for creation. And I'm not talking about just little vague stuff. I'm talking about big, oh wow, amazing, there's no way we were created, no way we evolved kind of things. But Trish, I couldn't get her to get lunch catered for y'all, so we're going to try to keep it down to just about 30 minutes or so. Okay, William Jennings Bryan was the name of the guy that was in the stand during that last movie. You know, creation science hadn't been born. The Scopes monkey trials happened in 1925, and there was no answer. He had no answer for all these things. But still, to this day, you know, only about 10 to 18% of people in the United States really believe that the world is only about 10,000 years old. I believe it's about 12 to 15,000. Some people have, like William Jennings Bryan did there, they're trying to reconcile these vast ages, these billions of years, with the Bible. Some say that every day was just a creative period, like, oh, you know, the old folks that say, oh, you know, back in my day, you know, this and that. But there's a lot of proof, and I can't get into it right now, but Hebrew scholars have proven that it's a 24-hour day, and as we'll see, it probably was. So, what is evolution? Everybody probably is familiar with the chart similar to this. Life formed out of, for some reason, formed as like a simple one-celled animal, and that one-celled animal evolved into something more complicated, evolved into a fish, which evolved into an amphibian, which evolved into reptiles, which evolved into mammals, which evolved into you. Okay, numerous successive small changes. By the way, the guy that made the idea popular is called Charles Darwin. Probably everybody already knows that. And as luck would have it, today is Charles Darwin's 208th birthday. Back in 1859, he wrote a book called The Origin of the Species. And this is what made evolution as we know it popular. He was not the first one to come up with this idea. He was just the first one to make it popular. Anaximander, which is an ancient Greek philosopher, he came up with the idea that life originated from this primordial ooze. they're saying that a bunch of chemicals got together and maybe something like a bolt of lightning come down and hit this perfect combination of chemicals, this chemical soup, and it turned into the first life form. But they've been proven that that couldn't happen because the conditions that it would take to make that amino acid that they so desperately need would immediately kill it. So they've proven that, and this was proven decades ago, life could not form spontaneously from some prebiotic soup. How it got there, the evolutionists still do not know. A guy named Jean-Baptiste Lamarck is the guy that came up with the idea, and he lived in about the same time as Darwin, that organisms change over time, that like you get leopards out of lizards and stuff like that. A guy named Herbert Spencer, who was really the first one to come up with Darwin's theory of evolution, came up with the idea of the survival of the fittest. And a guy named James Hutton and Charles Lyell were the ones who came up with the idea that the world is billions of years old, with great ages. So, first of all, we're going to address the age of the world. Everybody knows what that is. It's an atom. It's a nucleus. It contains a certain number of protons, a certain number of neutrons, and some electrons circling around it. Then there's radioactive atoms. You've heard of uranium or radioactivity. What radioactivity does is over a certain amount of time, all of a sudden that atom is going to shoot out a particle. That particle might be a proton, or it might be a proton and a neutron. It's called an alpha particle. And it shoots it out and immediately changes that atom into something else. Carbon-14 should be familiar. The term carbon-14 should be familiar to just about everybody. Carbon-14 decays, they call it nuclear decay. It decays into nitrogen, a specific isotope of nitrogen. Uranium, when it decays into a specific kind of lead. And the way that they can tell how old something is by the ratio of the daughter product, which was the lead or the nitrogen or whatever it turned into, to the still radioactive particles. And that's their intent there, is to tell how much had decayed, and they all decay at different times. Like carbon-14, it has a half-life, which is the way they measure how fast it decays, of about 5,700 years. Uranium is much, much longer. This is what the half-life looks like. Okay, when carbon-14 decays, about half of its radioactive particles have turned into the nitrogen, and then the next year, so on, every 5,700 years, half of that's gone, and after about 50,000 years, there's none left. Okay? And that's why they don't use carbon-14 to date rocks and stuff like that, because it only lasts about 50,000 years at our rate. They use carbon-14 specifically only to measure living things. And everybody has carbon-14 in them. It's radioactive, but it's not the kind of radioactive that's going to kill you and make you sick or anything. 50,000. An inch. Everybody knows how long an inch is. It's about that long. 50,000 inches would reach from about here to the other side of Irvington Street. It's about 3/4 of a mile. 50,000 inches is about 3/4 of a mile. Just to give you an idea of how big 50,000 is. 1,000,000 inches would reach you to, just depending on which way you go, about to FM 1960. FM 1960 is about 1,000,000 inches from here, give or take, depending on whether you take 45 or the Hardy. How far do you think 1,000,000,000 inches is? Chicago, New York? Would you believe from Houston to Perth, Australia, and halfway back? 1,000,000,000 is an unfathomable number. Well, they have found carbon-14 in diamonds, which are supposed to be 4 billion years old. 4 billion years, 4 billion inches is from Houston to Perth, Australia, and back 4 times. 6 times. there's no way for this margin of error. There's no way that a diamond could be 4 billion years old and have any carbon-14 left in it. The vast ages are having big problems here. How long does it take granite to form? When I was a kid, I grew up in Denver. There's a lot of granite around there. And inside granite are these little sparkly crystals. They call them zircons. And inside these zircons are polonium and uranium, which are both radioactive. Polonium decays into whatever it decays into in anywhere from 6 months to 103 years. Uranium takes thousands and thousands of years to decay. But yet they have what these call radio halos, which when the protons shoot out through a rock, they leave little trails, and they look like halos around the atoms. They've got both polonium and uranium side by side in the same rock. So that rock formed within days or hours, not years, certainly not millions of years. Evolution of animals. Everybody's seen that chart, I'm sure. They say that the horses started with the Eohippus, the Agliohippus, the Merseyhippus, all the way up to the modern horse. This is the way the horse evolved, right? There's only one problem with that. Well, actually, there's several problems with that. Man, we had the same apes, and the apes got bigger and more vertical until we got college students. And of course, this tree. Now, this tree right here, it starts out there from that first single life form, and it branches out into the sponges and the higher life forms, and finally the rabbits and birds and reptiles and stuff like that. Now, those branches, which one of those branches are imaginary? Every single one of those branches is imaginary. There are no missing links have ever been found. No missing links have ever been found between any major life form and another. There's not one transitional life form between fish and amphibians. They have not found one. They have not found one between amphibians and reptiles. They have not found one between reptiles and mammals. Not one. They found one that they think was half bird and half reptile. Turns out it's just a bird with teeth. The Archaeopteryx. One thing that Darwin himself said, he says, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. But I can find no such case. He wrote that. Well, here's one. He couldn't possibly have seen this, bless his heart. This is the motor that turns the tail of a bacteria. Turns at 100,000 RPM, the same RPM as a router, much faster than a circular saw or your motor or anything like that. And this is actually an electrical motor, and this is the tail of a bacteria. You got the stator and the rotor, and the bushings, and everything. And this thing turns 100,000 RPM, and it reverses instantly. Man still can't design anything like that, and this is so small that you can barely see it with a microscope. And that's a close-up view of all the rings and stuff. This is actually the bacteria's tail right there. The optic nerve. Now, if we were just by accident, you would think that our eye, which is a whole study in all of itself, there's no way that the eye could have evolved. But the optic nerve goes all the way to the back of your brain. Your visual cortex is in the back of your brain. Now, you would think that if it evolved, it would just hook the nerve onto the nearest spot and go on, you know? But no, this optic nerve is all the way over into the back of your brain. Couldn't have happened. Directional selection. They have tried this. The idea of like one life form evolving into another. They've tried this in the laboratory. By the way, that's fake. That's imaginary. Nope, didn't happen. Drosophila, the vinegar fly. What they did is the Drosophila, you can see, he's got those little bristles on his back. Well, what they did is they bred these things, and they took out all the ones that had only a few bristles and left the ones with most bristles to reproduce with each other. And over a period of time, did they evolve into another life form? No, they died. They died sterile. They died sterile. There's I forgot the term for it now, but there is a ceiling. There's only a certain amount of mutations, of changes that can be made to a DNA and for the creature to still live. And they've proven this not just with the Drosophila, but with other life forms too. It didn't happen. You do not change. Darwin, when he was on his cruise, he found this, what they call Darwin's finch. That's actually the name of them, Darwin's finch. And he noticed that their beaks, sometimes their beaks would be smaller, and sometimes the beaks would be bigger. When the weather was dry, their beaks would be bigger, and the weather was wet, the beaks would be smaller. Well, that was just adaptation, and that's still going on today, because they're able to eat better, But they don't change into another life form. They're still Darwin's finches. All they are is just have bigger beaks or smaller beaks depending on the weather. Humans. Probably everybody's seen that. Anybody around my age has certainly seen that. Haeckel's embryos. And they show this guy named Haeckel come up with this idea. It shows the remarkable similarity between the embryos of all these different life forms. The one on the left you can't really see it. I got it zoomed in too much here. Let's see if I can zoom it out. Okay. Anyway, the one on the left is a salamander, and the one on the left is a fish, and then a salamander, tortoise, a chick, a hog, a calf, a rabbit, and a human. Notice how remarkably similar they are when they first start out. He wants to show that we all came from the same ancestor. Well, guess what? This is fake. Not only was it fake, but they knew it within weeks of him publishing it. They proved it was a fake. They knew it was a fake, and yet they still use it, and they probably use it in classrooms today. I don't know, Luis, you still see this? No, you haven't seen that? So they finally cut that fraud out. Yeah. Did they cut the horses out yet? You know that those horses, one of Eohippus had 18 pairs of ribs. Orohippus had 15 pairs of ribs. Pliohippus jumped to 19 pairs of ribs, and the modern horse has 18 pairs of ribs. Now that's some pretty crazy evolution there. How about Lucy? Big. Oh, Lucy. Wow, we found the missing link. They even put a dress on her. Australopithecus. Oh, this is a big deal. We found the missing link. Guess what? Lucy was a lemur. These guys are desperate to prove their stuff. Cro-Magnon man. I didn't have it. Cro-Magnon man. Everybody's probably heard of Cro-Magnon and Neanderthals. Cro-Magnon, fully human. There's no difference. There's not a significant enough difference between Cro-Magnon and modern man to say that it's a different species. Neanderthal. If you put a business suit on a Neanderthal and walked him down the streets of New York, you'd never notice him. Fully human. The Piltdown man was a complete fraud. They found a human skull somewhere, and another guy, and he found a pig's tooth somewhere, and he filed it down and put some brown stuff on that tooth and called it Piltdown man. It was a complete fraud. They think it was what was his name that wrote the guy that wrote the Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. They think he's actually the one who made up Piltdown man. Complete fake. Java man was actually disavowed by the discoverer. And Australopithecus, we already talked about her. Nebraska man, America's own ape man, has become very popular. This fossil consisted of one tooth, and it was later discovered to be the tooth of a pig. Some of the things that you won't really probably hear in your science classes is about the Cambrian explosion. You might remember that they found these life forms in nice, neat layers and all this kind of stuff. There's the Precambrian era, and then there's the Cambrian era. Well, in the Cambrian era, all of a sudden life appeared out of nowhere, fully formed, very complex. Trilobites, which are now extinct, were very complicated little life forms. They appeared fully formed, fully developed. This is for real. I just went up and saw this in July. That is outside of Fort Worth, Texas, a town called Glen Rose. They have this dinosaur park. And there they have a dinosaur footprint stepping in a human footprint in stone. The dinosaurs were supposed to have been extinct 3 million years ago before man ever showed up. Man lived at the same time as dinosaurs. They have found cave paintings of dinosaurs, and there's even down in South America on this pillar, this religious temple or whatever they have down there, they actually have a picture of a Stegosaurus, which is a dinosaur on there. Man lived at the same time as dinosaurs. Behemoth, in the book of Job, Behemoth talked about this tail the size of a tree. Well, the only thing that could possibly be would have been like a brontosaurus, the arthropods. That's the only thing they could possibly describe. He ate cow like an ox. He ate grass like an ox, and he had a tail like a tree. They could only be a dinosaur. Job lived at the same time as dinosaurs. A lot of people, and I don't want to keep you all because there's just so much material, but I want to show you this here.
Using computer animation based on molecular research, we are now able to see how DNA is actually copied in living cells. You are looking at an assembly line of amazing miniature biochemical machines that are pulling apart the DNA double helix and cranking out a copy of each strand. The DNA to be copied enters the production line from bottom left. The whirling blue molecular machine is called helicase. It spins the DNA as fast as a jet engine as it unwinds the double helix into 2 strands. One strand is copied continuously and can be seen spooling off to the right. Things are not so simple for the other strand because it must be copied backwards. It is drawn out repeatedly in loops and copied one section at a time. The end result is 2 new DNA molecules. What you are about to see is DNA's most extraordinary secret: how a simple code is turned into flesh and blood. It begins with a bundle of factors assembling at the start of a gene. A gene is simply a length of DNA instructions stretching away to the left. The assembled factors trigger the first phase of the process, reading off the information that will be needed to make the protein. Everything is ready to roll. 3, 2, 1, go. The blue molecule racing along the DNA is reading the gene. It's unzipping the double helix and copying one of the 2 strands. The yellow chain snaking out of the top is a copy of the genetic message, and it's made of a close chemical cousin of DNA called RNA. The building blocks to make the RNA enter through an intake hole. They are matched to the DNA, letter by letter, to copy the A's, C's, T's, and G's of the gene. The only difference is that in the RNA copy, the letter T is replaced with a closely related building block known as U. You are watching this process called transcription in real time. It's happening right now in almost every cell in your body.
Now, how did that just happen? Just by accident. Come on, y'all. Are we the crazy ones? Are we the idiots? Are we the fools? Do you believe we're created? No, I don't think so. I think that the evolutionists, they have more faith in their evolution than we have in God. If Darwin was alive today, he'd be laughed off the planet. If they knew this now, there's no way that he could come up with this accident stuff. The world is young. There's a lot more proof than, what I took the time to show you all today. Like, for instance, dust on the moon. When they landed the Apollo 11 in 1969, you might remember that the lunar lander had great big feet because they were expecting 4 billion years worth of moon dust. There was only a few thousand years worth of moon dust on the moon. And as we saw from the DNA, there's no way that this could have happened by accident. That was way too complicated. And all this stuff is going on inside your body right now in almost every cell in your body. All that DNA transcription and the cells dividing and stuff like that. One life form will not change to another. They've proven that not only with the Drosophila, but with all various other things. And we are not fools for believing in God. That's all I have. If the prayer warriors would like to come up, we'd have the altar call now. If you would like to give your heart to God, or if you need prayer for any reason or anything, or maybe want to join the church or something, come on up.